Then came the pause when presumably it was time for her to say thank you and to take her leave. She stood up, but Oreshenko insisted she take a glass of tea with him. Really, I don't want any tea, Ludmila Afansyevna told him. Well, I do. It's just time for my tea. He was making a determined effort to pull her out of the category of the criminally ill into the category of the hopelessly healthy. Are your young people at home? She asked him. The young people were the same age as Ludmila Afansyevna. No, they're not. My granddaughter isn't here either. I'm on my own. Still, it was in his consulting room that he had received her as a doctor. It was only here that he could impress her with the true significance of what he said. Are you going to play the hostess for me then? She said, because I won't let you. No, there's no need for that. I've got a full thermos. There are some cakes and plates for them in the cupboard. You could get them if you like. They moved into the dining room and sat down to drink their tea at one corner of the square oak table, big enough for an elephant to dance on and much too big to be got through any of the doors. The wall clock, not in its first youth, showed that it was still quite early. Dormadon Tikhonovich began to talk about his granddaughter, who was his favorite. She had recently finished a course at the conservatoire. She played charmingly, and she was both intelligent, a rarity among musicians, and attractive. He showed Ludmila Afansyevna a new photo of her, but he didn't talk about her excessively. He didn't insist on Ludmila Afansyevna giving his granddaughter her undivided attention. Not that she could have given her undivided attention to anything. It had been smashed into pieces now and would never be put together again. How odd it was to be sitting here, carefree, drinking tea with someone who already knew the extent of the danger and could probably foresee how the illness would develop. Yet here he sat, and not one word would he utter. All he did was pass the cookies. She had someone to talk about, too. Not her divorced daughter. That was much too painful a subject, but her son. Having finished his 8th year in school, he had announced that he had come to the conclusion that he saw no point in further study. Neither his father nor his mother could find a single agreement to sway him. Arguments just bounced off his head. You have to have an education. Why should I? Education and culture are the most important things in life. The most important thing in life is to have a good time. But you'll never get a decent job without an education. I don't need one. You mean you're happy to be an ordinary laborer? No, you won't catch me working like a donkey. Well, what will you live on then? I'll always find something. You only have to know what's what. He had fallen in with some very suspicious characters, and Ludmila Afansyevna was worried. Sounds like a young communist, to be honest. Like a stupid socialist. The expression on Oreshenkov's face indicated that he had heard stories like this before. He said, you know, one of the problems is that our young people have lost one of their most important receptors, the family doctor. Girls of 14 and boys of 16 need to have a doctor to talk to. Not in a classroom, 40 at a time, though they don't even have that these days. And not at school surgery either, with people coming in at 3-minute intervals. It had to be the same uncle who examined their throats when they were little children and came to tea at their house. Now what if this kind, stern, impartial uncle of a doctor who never gives in to your temper or wheedlings, as parents do, were suddenly to take the youngster into his surgery, lock the door, and gently start an obscure sort of conversation, both embarrassing and interesting, and then without any prompting, were to guess all of his or her most important and difficult questions and answer them himself? And what if he invited them back for another talk? Surely this would not only guard them against making mistakes, against giving in to bad urges, against harming their bodies. Mightn't it also cleanse and correct their whole view of the world? Once their chief anxieties and desires are understood, they will no longer imagine they're so hopelessly incomprehensible in other respects. From that moment on, they will find the arguments their parents produce much more impressive too. Ludmila Afansyevna had herself prompted him to this discourse by telling the story of her son. Since her son's problems were still unsolved, she ought now to be listening to what Oreshenko said and thinking how best to apply it to the case. When he spoke, It was in a full, pleasant voice, which had not yet cracked with age. His eyes were bright and lively with meaning, which added conviction to his words. But Dontsova noticed that as the minutes went by, she was losing the blissful calm that had refreshed her in his consulting room armchair. There was an unpleasant, dreary feeling rising in her chest, a sensation of something lost, of something being lost even as she listened to his well-thought-out speech, an urge to get up and run away, although she had no idea where to, why, or for what purpose. "You're right," she agreed. "We have neglected sex education. We seem to think children ought to." I knew it was going there. I have to say, Solzhenitsyn really knows how to spice up these paragraphs at the end. He always does this. Everyone's going to hook up in every chapter. "You're right," she agreed. "We have neglected sex education. We seem to think children ought to pick it all up for themselves, like animals. And that's exactly how they do, like animals. We seem to think it's unnecessary to warn children against perversion, because we work from the assumption that in a healthy society, they should all be normal. So they have to learn from one another, and what they learn is vague and distorted. In all other fields, we regard it as essential that our children be guided. It's only in this field that guidance is considered shameful. That is why you sometimes meet grown women who have never experienced the full range of emotion, for the simple reason that the man didn't know how to treat her on their first night." This is my breakdown, so you tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he just kind of insinuated that dudes suck at making women, or closing the deal, if you will. And because of this, because they were never taught this, which most people aren't, most men. This is so deep, I can't get into this right now because I think I've got a whole theory about this. So I'm just going to get back to it. So they have taken to learn from one another, and what they learn is vague and distorted. In all other fields, we regard it as essential that our children be guided. It's only in this field that the guidance is considered shameful. That is why you sometimes meet grown women who have never experienced the full range of emotion, for the simple reason that the man didn't know how to treat her on their first night. Yes, said Dontsova. Yes, indeed, said Oreshenko firmly. He had noticed the momentary troubled, confused, impatient expression on Dontsova's face. But since she wasn't eager to know the nature of her disease, why keep going over the symptoms on a Saturday night, when she would only have to step behind an X-ray machine on Monday? It was his job to distract her by conversation, and what better topic could there be for doctors to talk about? Generally speaking, he remarked, the family doctor is the most comforting figure in our lives, and now he's being pulled up by the roots. The family doctor is a figure without whom the family cannot exist in a developed society. He knows the needs of each member of the family, just as the mother knows their tastes. There's no shame in taking to him some trivial complaint you'd never take to the outpatient's clinic. He knows the needs of each member of the family, just as the mother knows their tastes. There's no shame in taking to him some trivial complaint you'd never take to the outpatient's clinic, which entails getting an appointment card and waiting your turn, and where there's a quota of 9 patients an hour. And yet all neglected illnesses arise out of those trifling complaints. How many adult human beings are there, now, at this minute, rushing about in mute panic, wishing they could find a doctor, the kind of person to whom they can pour out their fears they have deeply concealed, or even found shameful? Looking for the right doctor is the sort of thing you can't always ask your friends for advice about. You can't advertise for one in a newspaper either. In fact, it's a matter as essentially intimate as a search for a husband or a wife. But nowadays, it's easier to find a good wife than a doctor ready to look after you personally for as long as you want, and who understands you fully and truly. Lyudmila Afanasievna frowned. These were abstract ideas. Meanwhile, her head was whirling with more and more symptoms arranging themselves in the worst possible pattern. That's all very well, but how many family doctors would you need? It simply doesn't fit into the system of a free universal national health service. It'll fit into a universal national health service, but it won't fit into a free health service, said Oreshenko, rumbling on and clinging confidentially to the point. Ooh, got him. This is nuts. Okay, so you've got Lyudmila Afanasievna sitting here, and she is basically dying of a disease because she doesn't have the ability to go and, well, it's more of just her dying from a disease. It's like she's come to this doctor who's been criminally prosecuted for having his own private practice in a only public socialist communist society. He's been literally put in prison for this. And the only reason he's allowed to continue practicing is because he's already, by way of criminally operating, and also literally operated on people of high value because they know he's very good. And he's proven his track record as far as saving lives of, politicians and other highly respected people in the society. So this doctor, who has lived by the book her whole life, is coming to this guy who's made his stripes, made his bones by doing what is illegal. Because, as I like to say, socialism just turns free markets into black markets because people are going to do what they need to do to succeed, whether or not it's legal or illegal. If you take away everyone's food in China and say you have to be on a collective farm, they're just going to go to the city and sell things they stole from the collective farm so they could eat. Anyway, this all comes to a head when Lyudmila Afanasievna, here with her disease, is talking about her disease and the fact that the entire, well, at least she's agreeing with Oreshenko and the fact that, like, their society is kind of fucked up and all the kids don't know anything and they're little communists, and it's because they're talking about universal health care. I'll just say that. She's like, oh, but we couldn't do this. You can't have a family doctor in this universal health care system of ours. And he's like, well, yeah, you could, but it just can't be free. You can have good health care. Can't be free. You have to pay for it. So the main point here is, like, would you rather pay for it and have it or not have it at all? It's just so mind-blowing to me that there are systems in place and people like this. Lyudmila Afanasievna frowned. These were abstract ideas. Meanwhile, her head was whirling with one or more symptoms arranging themselves in the worst possible patterns. That's all very well, but how many family doctors would you need? It simply doesn't fit into the system of a free, universal national health service. It'll fit into a universal national health service, but it won't fit into a free health service, said Oreshenko, clinging confidently to his point. But it's our greatest achievement, the fact that it's a free service. Is this, in fact, a great achievement? What does free mean? That doctors don't work for nothing, It only means that they're paid out of the national budget, and the budget is supported by patients. It isn't free treatment. It's depersonalized treatment.